for coming out on a Monday morning and joining us, man. I really appreciate you taking your time. Really means a lot. Tommy and I mean, shoot, we've been chatting together, working together for pretty much as long as I've been in the business. Probably almost 10 years now at
Yeah.
this point. So to introduce you guys, this is Tommy Hinson. He is the CEO of Investor 1031 Exchange, and several other companies that he's kind of had offshoots in the past several years with all sorts of investment opportunities here in San Diego and beyond in the United States. And I've been following Tommy's career and we've been buddies. He's been helping me out with 1031 exchange classes for quite some time because, you know, I know enough to be dangerous, but this here is the real man behind the curtain. So, with no further ado, I would like to hand it off to Tommy to talk to you guys about 1031 exchanges, forwards, reverses. We're going to learn all sorts of really interesting stuff today that'll make you guys even smarter agents and better loan officers and speaking with our clients. So, Tommy, take it away, my friend.
Perfect. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, man.
It's definitely been a while.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys joining, and I'm going to try to figure out how to use Zoom here on this. But to share my screen, I can just click here, right?
Just click the share screen. Yep. And you got it.
There it is. All right. Well, why don't we just do this? I'll just talk, and then I'll share this presentation with you guys. Um, once we
You
get
having a tough time pulling it up?
yeah, it's saying I have to see share screen. There it is. Share.
Boom.
I
Yeah.
work.
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, so I appreciate you guys coming in. So what I do with these presentations is really show you just enough to where you understand what it is. There's a lot of benefits to it for agents. So, for example, this is a way to earn two listings or to get two deals, instead of one. But really, it's tax code, and so there's a lot of little things about it that you have to be careful with because you don't want to give people too much information when you're trying to talk to them about their taxes. So, what I like to do is show you how to use this to get more business. Um, and not use it to try to become a tax consultant or anything like that. But I think by the time we're done here, you'll see, the benefit of this and becoming more of a real estate consultant. That's what I always tell people is, agents sometimes can just get transactional and there's not a lot of people out that can explain how to use real estate, from a tax perspective and how to write off depreciation and really consult with people instead of just, it's a good time to buy and sell your property. And so that's what we try to get into here. So again, it's just what you need to know. When it starts to get really complicated, then that's when you're going to want to get me on the phone or one of our associates to dig in pretty deep. But to start, 1031 is actually an IRS code. So a 1031 exchange is IRC 1031, which allows an investor to defer paying capital gains taxes. So, sell a property, you don't want to pay those capital gains taxes. So, you set up a 1031 exchange with us. When they sell the property, the money's not going to touch their hands. It's going to channel through a trust account that we open for them. And by doing that, and then when they're ready to buy another property, then we're going to wire the money directly to escrow. So, by doing that, it never touches their hands. And by never touching their hands means they don't have control of that money, and so it's not actually taxable. So it's tax deferred, not tax exempt, meaning that they're putting off paying the taxes. But what I'm going to show you by the end of this is ultimately they're never going to pay the taxes. It's only for investment property and property used in a business. I think that's the biggest one. You're going to get people that have these huge gains on their real estate. They want to sell them, but they don't want to pay the tax. Then they get on the phone with me. We start talking, and then we find out that it's their primary residence, which doesn't qualify for this. So this is only for investment property. On your primary residence, you should know that you have the 121 exclusion, which is the $250,000 of tax-free income, and the $500,000 if you're married. So you actually do have some benefits on your primary, but for the 1031, just keep in mind it's only for investment properties. And you must replace the asset with equal or greater value. So all that means is if I sell my property for $1 million, I got to buy another property for $1 million for this to work. So that's the benefit again as an agent, or even a loan officer. You don't want them paying those taxes because now they have to go out and buy a property that's the same value or greater. So you're looking at two
So,
different.
so Tommy, can I split that up into multiple ones?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we had a client that sold an office building just recently and bought 14 properties in Indiana, 14 single family homes. So
Wow.
you can definitely break it up as many ways as you want to. So, and a lot of people do that, and it's great to, diversify. So it's good if you've got substantial gain on one property and go buy multiple properties and kind of break that up for diversification.
And when you're saying that you have to buy something of equal or lesser value, it so you have to use up everything that you have as far as capital gain is concerned. But say you sell your house for that $1 million, it has to be over $1 million. It can't like you can't. It's not the profit that matters. It's the price that you sell it at that matters.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the hardest part to explain is that you've got cash and you've got debt. And the way it works is if I sell $1 million property, and I have a $500,000 loan on it, I know I'm only going to have $500,000 in cash to go buy the next property, but I have to buy $1 million property. And so I know I have to go out and get that debt replaced. So we call it debt replacement and equity replacement. So the debt always takes care of itself. Again, if you're buying equal or greater value than what you sold and you only have 500,000 in cash, then obviously you have to go get that loan too. So, some people don't. And so the one thing to remember is it's not all or nothing. And if you read it online, it'll say, if I don't use all the cash and replace that loan, then I'm going to pay some taxes. That's the case. You will pay some taxes, but don't worry if you buy less or if you don't replace the loan or you want to use some of the cash to pay off credit cards, that's okay. You would just pay the tax on some of that money. But whatever you push forward is what you'd be able to avoid taxes on. So it's not all or nothing.
Gotcha. Cool.
Um,
Thanks.
so so the big question that always comes up with 1031 exchanges are the timing and how long do I have to hold the property before I can move into it, before I can sell it. A lot of flippers try to use this code to not pay taxes. Doesn't really work. So your intent has to be to hold for investment. And so that just means that I'm buying this property for investment. My plan is to hold it, rent it out, sit on it. If you start talking about how soon you can sell it, how you can buy it, fix it up, flip it, that kind of thing, that's what can get you disqualified. So when I tell my clients who, will call me and say, "Hey, I'm going to buy this property, I'm going to fix it up, I'm going to sell it," and say, "No, you're not. You're going to buy it and you're going to hold it. That's your plan, and let's keep at that." And as things happen, intent does change. What we like to tell people is 2 years is very safe. And that just means that if you buy the property and you hold it for 2 years and you have two tax returns on it showing that you used it for an investment property, then you decide maybe I want to sell this thing, that's fine. But just go into it with the understanding that we need to hold it for investment, and that's what will keep it going. And California, especially, they will really look at stuff that's sold in less than 2 years and really wonder, if the intention was to hold it for investment. So, make sure that the investors understand that part of it. So again, rental or income production, investment, or use in a business is what qualifies. The main thing they're looking for here is that you're not your primary. So we get a lot of clients who call and try to do this with their primary residence and just, that's the very first question I always ask is this is not your primary residence. So, that's the big one. Properties that don't qualify are, again, the flips, condo conversions, and properties acquired to develop. So on development stuff, obviously you're buying land, you're developing properties with the intent of selling. If you do buy land and develop it and hold those properties for investment purposes, they will qualify, but just most developers, develop and sell. So the investor must have the intent to reinvest in like-kind replacement property. We'll get through that in a minute. Like-kind is not really the word I like to use because anything would qualify, that's real estate. Like we said, equal or greater fair market value. So if I sell a property for $1 million, I'm looking to acquire another property for $1 million. Investor must acquire or reinvest 100% of the equity and cash proceeds. So if they want to avoid all taxes, that's the key, is use all the cash, replace the debt. Again, if you're buying equal or greater value, you'll defer all taxes. You can always add cash, but can't withdraw cash without paying the taxes. So you can always buy more, just not less. So this is the issue with the term like-kind properties. Single family, multifamily, commercial, office, retail, industrial, all of these are covered under the like-kind property. So if I sell a single family rental home and decide I want to buy a retail center, that would qualify. What you're looking for here is just really anything that's attached to the ground. One of the other things that comes up are the 30-year leases. So the IRS does look at a lease that has 30 years or more on it, including options, could actually qualify too. So you could actually sell a rental property and buy, a lease that has 30 years on it. So we see some of those.
And
And then
what would that look like? What would a 30-year lease look like? Is that like a mobile home park or
it can be mobile home parks. What we see a lot of it in is cell towers. So
okay.
what happens with the cell towers is you have, a farmer that AT&T will come out and put up a tower on their land and give them a 30-year lease to where we're going to pay you for the next 30 years to have this piece of land to put this tower on. And so what happens is those clients will call me because there's companies that want to buy those towers. So they'll buy all the towers and put them into these funds. And so the farmer will call and say, hey, this guy's going to give me $500,000 for this lease that's got 30 years on it. I can actually 1031 exchange that lease and go buy real estate with it.
Huh.
And smart ones do that because now they own this real estate, whereas the tower, that lease could, cut out, they could give them a 30-day notice and pull out of that lease. And so you're able to take the money for those 30 years and roll it into actual real estate. And so that's one of the big ones that we see a lot of. And there's
Sweet.
towers on most of the buildings you see, so AT&T and Verizon, all these guys will put towers on top of buildings and, out in farm fields and all of it. And so
Hmm.
seen quite a bit of that.
That's interesting.
And just real quickly on the TIC and DST, those are fractional ownership interest in real estate. So what you have a lot of is, the baby boomers who have all this real estate. They're tired of the three T's, toilets, trash, and tenants. They want to sell these properties, not pay the taxes, but then they don't want to have to go buy another property. So there's all these investment opportunities where you can buy fractional ownership interests. For instance, a lot of the high rises in downtown San Diego were tenant in common. So a guy will build those buildings and then sell it off in pieces. And then as an individual investor, you can actually go in and buy a small piece of it. And so the main reason to understand that is when you're trying to get a listing, you're trying to get the sellers to move off the fence. You tell them, you can sell this and not pay any taxes through 1031. They're like, great, but they're not going to go buy another property. You can say, you can actually roll that money into these funds that are fractional ownership interest. They're fully passive investments. And so you can just put your money in there, earn a paycheck every month, and not have to deal with any of the headaches of owning real estate. So that's a key. Obviously, your first goal is to buy them, get them into another piece of real estate, which would be great. But if you can't get them to sell because of that, understand that those investments do qualify for 1031 exchange.
And I noticed that there are several newer agents that are on the call. If you don't mind, can you just explain to everybody what a TIC and a DST is, please?
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
So PIC is a tenant in common, and a DST is a Delaware statutory trust. And so what those are two different platforms that qualify for putting together a group of investors to buy a piece of real estate. So a tenant in common is I'm going to own 5% undivided interest as a tenant in common with Ed, who owns 5% undivided interest with so on and so on. And so you can have, 15 people on title that shows what percentage that they each own in those pieces of real estate. So that's my favorite form of doing it. You actually get a deed saying I own 2% of the property. I have voting rights. The max tenant commons you can have on a piece of real estate is 35. And so that's rarely does it get to that number, but that's, the best way to do it, in my opinion. I think when you walk into a courtroom and you show that you have a deed, everyone in the room understands it. Whereas a Delaware statutory trust is the trustee makes all the decisions on the property. You can become a beneficiary of the trust. And so, you can have up to 500 investors on there, but as the trustee makes all the decisions, you're literally just along for the ride and doing a passive deal. So you're going to see more of the DSTs and the large institutional deals because, when you need to raise 500 million, it's going to be easier with a DST than to try to raise $500 million for a piece of property with, your 35 tick investors. Also, the banks like DSTs better. They'd much rather deal with one person, which is the trustee, rather than have to deal with, multiple investors that are on title. So that's, those are the two platforms. And so again, you can buy and it doesn't have to be through 1031 exchanges. There's all kinds of investments. And, so we do a lot of ticks, outside of doing the 1031 business, but you can, as for $50,000, you can invest into a small piece of a large real estate development. So we see, quite a few of those happening today. Um,
Thanks, man.
what doesn't qualify are in the non-like kind properties, again, your primary residence, properties held for sale, those are the fix and flips and condo conversions, cash, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You can't necessarily, sell your real estate, do a 1031 exchange and buy stocks and bonds. That doesn't really work. So the big one on this is LLCs. So one of the issues that you have with 1031 exchanges is people own real estate in partnerships, which is an LLC that has multiple people in it. And what happens is when they go to sell the property, whatever entity sells the property has to be the entity that buys the property. And so what happens with partnerships, or you have people who get together, start a company and buy a piece of real estate together. And then when they go to sell it, they don't want to go the same direction. One wants to cash out, one wants to do a 1031 exchange. The way the IRS sees it is that the LLC owns the property, the two investors own the LLC. And so that LLC has been paying taxes. And remember, we're deferring taxes. So now it comes up that this partnership is going to be selling this property. That same partnership that's going to be deferring those taxes has to be the partnership that buys the new piece of property. And that's where you kind of get into a little bit of a bind. So what I always tell people is if you're going to own real estate together with a partner, make sure it's a tenant in common, like we just discussed. So Ed's LLC can own 50% and Tommy's LLC can own 50%. That's fine. But when, Ed and Tommy get together and start a company and that company owns the real estate, that's where we get into a bind. If we ever want to go separate ways, if we ever want to take some cash out, it just becomes a real headache. So always try to explain to people, buy properties in tenant and commons, make sure that your LLC is on title. You're paying your own taxes. That way, whenever you have the exit, you're not dealing with that problem. It comes up all the time.
Great advice.
Yep. So the big thing on 1031s are your timelines. So when you sell the property, so we call it the relinquished property. So you sell the property, it goes into escrow, it closes. That's when the clock starts for 1031. So when the property closes, the money's going to go into a trust account that we open for them and send it to their own bank account. Once it goes to their bank account, it's a taxable event. So that's how we're avoiding that. But the big thing is you have 45 days to identify what you want to reinvest that money into. And so it's a quick turnaround. A lot of people stress over that. So we always tell them, start looking early, make sure you delay escrow if you don't know what you want to invest in. We have some ways that we can help them with that, but the main thing is the clock starts at midnight the following day. You must comply with one of the ID rules. So the way you identify is the three property rule, which is you're going to go out and pick three properties that you're interested in. Hopefully you can close on one of those. The 200% rule, which is if I sell a property for $1 million, I can actually go out and identify up to $2 million in properties. So that's, one that you can use, or the 95% exception. That's any amount of properties at any value, but you have to buy 95% of what you invest or what you identify. So that's where you're going to deal with, you know, uh, big, like the guy that bought the 14 properties, or a guy who wants to buy a subdivision or a portfolio of properties. That's when they're going to use that. So really what we see is the three property rule is really the one that's used primarily for this. And all it is again, we're going to send you a piece of paper and you're going to fill out three addresses, get it back to us before that 45th day. Obviously, the strategy is delay your closing date, start looking for property early. Those ticks and DSTs are really good. So a lot of times we'll use those as safety nets. All right, I really want to buy this property. Here's my second choice, but let's put one of these ticks or DSTs into the third choice. That way, if we can't find something, at least we can fall back and invest in one of those types of deals. And then you have 180 days to complete the exchange. So, this is where you have 180 days to actually close on a property and be on title. The only time that changes is around October, because it's 180 days or when you file your taxes. And so after October, you start to get into the middle of April is less than 180 days. And so you have to close before you file your taxes, or you get 180 days. Obviously, what you can do there is just file an extension. So that's what most people do. If it's too tight of a timeline and they know they're not going to be able to close on a property before paying taxes, all they have to simply do is call their CPA, extend that deadline down to, September, and then they can avoid that same situation. A lot of what comes up is it 45 days, then 180? No, it's 45 plus 135 for a total of 180. So again, the day you close on the property you sold is when that timeline starts. It's 45, then 135 to give you 180 days. Begins at the close of sale transaction, and then no extensions, which is interesting because I should probably remove that. California has now had it twice. We had an extension done during COVID, um, calling it natural disasters. And, strange enough, we just had another extension because of all the rain we just had. And in California, if it rains, it's a natural disaster. So, but the governor actually allowed us to extend based on all the rain and flooding that we just currently had, which is great for us. It's great. It takes a lot of pressure off of the investors, but it has happened twice now in the last couple of years. So there can be some extensions on that 180 days. So I don't like to get into a ton of numbers because this can, be the part where everybody goes to lunch or the restroom. It doesn't come back because these are tax numbers. But just to put it in perspective, I like to show you just real quick how much these numbers actually mean. Because what happens is people will look it up and they go, hey, you know what? The capital gains tax rate is only 15%. I made $100,000. It's fine. I'll pay the 15 grand and, we'll just move on. But there's other things that go into it. There's depreciation recapture, meaning that when you own an investment property and you're depreciating it every year and you go to sell that property, the IRS wants 25% of that money back. And so now you're going from 15 to 25% on that. If you've held the property for, multiple years, you could be looking at, 25 grand, $250,000 in some cases. If you make passive income over $250,000, so take out what you make for your career or your real job, but let's say you sold some stock or you sold an investment property and you made over 250 grand, they're going to hit you with a 3.8% for healthcare tax reform or healthcare reform tax rate. And then you have California, which can be as high as 13.3%. And so when you really start to look at it, you could be as high as 40% of what you make in that. So, you made $100,000 on a piece of real estate that you bought and sold, and you're literally giving away, 40% of that, it can really hurt. So those are the rates. And so I do a quick case study to show that, if a client buys a property for $500,000 and holds it for 10 years, we know in San Diego that could easily mean this property is now worth $1 million. So if they had decided to sell the property and not do a 1031 exchange, first they're going to pay 100,000. So they made $500,000 in gain, right? So $100,000 is going to go to the federal. 3.8% is going to hit for the healthcare reform. And then in California, they're at 51,500. So they end up with a $329,500 net capital gain. Then we go into depreciation recapture. We're assuming this investor wrote off that property for 10 years, which was 185,185 is what they wrote off. So at 25%, now they've got to pay $46,000 in depreciation recapture. So now they're left with $283,000. So they could have walked away with 500,000 had they done a 1031 exchange, but now they're down to 283,000, which is a 44% reduction in the amount of principal that they had.
Let that sink in for a minute.
And you know what? What's really sad is where I get the call is I just sold this investment property and I found out about 1031s. Can I do a 1031 exchange? And the answer is no, because once you close, now you have constructive receipt of those funds. It's a taxable event. So you get the clients that are really upset. So the key is to make sure that they are aware of 1031s before they close on that relinquished property. And so the big issue with that is it's not so much that they gave away money to what I call the worst charity, which is the IRS. They gave it away and it's really going to affect their income. So now they're going to take the $283,000 they have left over. They're going to go to Ed, get a 50% loan. So now they can go buy a $566,000 property. And let's just assume they're making gross scheduled income of 10% per year. So now they're making $56,000 a year on that property. So they gave away all this money in taxes, still went out and bought an investment property and they're making $56,000 a year, which is great, right? But had they done a 1031 exchange, they would have had all $500,000 to reinvest. They go get that same loan from Ed. So now they've got $1 million property and the same gross scheduled income is 10%. So now it's $100,000 a year they're making in income. So by not telling him about a 1031 or not, explaining it, they lost $43,000 a year in income. That'll really upset people. So it's really important that if you're talking to anyone that's selling investment properties, that they understand this because they will be really upset at all of us if they don't find out about it till the end. So there's three types of exchanges. The main one that everybody uses and understands is the forward exchange. That means I'm going to sell a property. I'm going to have 180 days to buy another property. There's two different types, the delayed and simultaneous. Simultaneous simply means that they're going to sell a property and buy a property in the same day. So that'll happen. So they'll line up the property they're going to acquire. They know when they're closing or they're selling. And so they'll literally sell here. Money does channel through us, and then we put it directly into the next escrow company, and then close. Delayed is that we're going to sell it, put the money in the trust account, take some time, go out, find the right properties, and then reinvest that. The reverse exchange is something that's coming up quite a bit recently. And what that is you actually have the ability to go buy the property you want to buy first, and then have 180 days to sell the property that you want to sell to pay off either the loan you got for that property or pay yourself back if you paid cash for it. The reason that comes up is it's hard sometimes that, some of these guys, let's say they bought a rental house, in the 60s for 50 grand, and then they've been exchanging, and then they bought, a duplex, and then they bought an apartment building, and they've been deferring all these taxes, for decades. And now they've built up all this real estate. If they ever were to, cash out, their tax basis is going to go back from that original purchase because they've been just deferring the taxes. So now they've got $5 million in real estate off a $50,000 investment. If they aren't able to find something to invest in that 45-day window, it could go back and trigger all those taxes from the very beginning. So those are the types of guys and girls that will go out and want to do a reverse. They're going to go find the property they want, tie it up, close on it. They know they can sell what they have to sell just based on timing. So they'll use that quite a bit on the reverse side. Or it happens all the time that, contingencies used to happen quite a bit. They're coming back a little bit, but for the most part, if you find a piece of real estate that you want to acquire, most sellers are not going to say, yeah, take your time. Let me know once you sell your property. So the contingencies are kind of tough to deal with right now. So we're seeing a lot more reverse exchanges happen. Then the build to suit and improvement exchanges. That's where, remember, we talked about equal or greater value. So you could sell a property for called $1 million and go buy a property for $800,000 and then use a portion of those funds to increase the value of it. So you can see that gets used quite a bit. The issue with that is you only have 180 days to use that money. So you can't just go, buy a property and, build a rental home on it. We see it a lot in farms where you can go, buy the dirt in a farm and then put up a, manufactured shed or barn, stuff like that. So, but just keep in mind when people come in and say, well, can I use some of the money to improve the property? The answer is yes. There's a lot more that goes into the reverse and the build to suit, which we could do a whole seminar on, but just for your information that those two types of exchanges do exist on top of the forward.
Real quick, a few questions in the chat. Oh, never mind. Never mind.
Keep going, Tommy. It's all good.
Yeah, I flipped the slide at the right time. So the question does happen, does the investor eventually have to pay taxes? And this is tough because you get a lot of CPAs that tell their clients, look, you're just deferring taxes. Ultimately, you're going to have to pay these. That's not the case. We actually call it swap until you drop. So you can actually continue to trade throughout your life. When you pass away, your tax liability passes away with you. What happens is your heirs will actually inherit your properties. All the tax basis goes away, and there's a step up in the new basis, meaning that at the day of death, the new value of that property, the new fair market value of that property is where it starts over. So going back to the guy that bought a $50,000 piece of real estate, now he's up to 5 million. The day he passes away, the new basis is 5 million. So his family could sell that property the next day and not pay any capital gains taxes on it. There would be some estate tax. There's other things that come up with it, but as far as pure capital gains taxes, that's not the case. So that's why I say this is really a tool to build wealth and to integrate into your estate planning. It's not just a tax loophole. You really want to help your investors understand that, continue to trade. You can ultimately get rid of those capital gains and depreciation recapture. And then, family gets properties and they're super happy. So, obviously, as an accommodator, the big thing is about protecting your investors. We've seen a lot of 1031 exchange companies go out of business. It's not regulated. So what you want to do is make sure that your exchange company is a member of the Federation of Exchange Accommodators. That just means we have extra eyes looking and audits at how we run our businesses. We have certified exchange specialists, so our exchange officers have taken the test and had studied to become exchange specialists. We have up to $100 million in deposit insurance, so FDIC. So we can have an investor give us $80 million. What we do is we take that and spread it out amongst multiple banks to make sure that it's fully FDIC insured. And we like to use local and regional banks. We like to be able to have personal relationships with who this money's sitting with. And so we found that having local and regional banks are kind of the key. So if you're not going to use us, Investors 1031 Exchange, then these are the questions I would ask if they say, well, I already have an accommodator. Just say, well, let's make sure that, we're using these checkpoints to make sure that your money's going to be safe. So yeah, and we are the accommodator. So when people ask, well, what's your role? People refer to us as the QI, which is qualified intermediary, or the accommodator, the exchange accommodation title holder. So that goes into reverse and build to suit exchanges where we have to actually take title for a period of time during the exchange period. So we'll actually take title to real estate to help our investors not pay taxes. Like we talked about, we do all types of exchanges. We do all 50 states and we do foreign property. So a lot of people don't know that you can exchange foreign for foreign or domestic for domestic. So I can sell a property in California, buy anywhere in the United States, can't buy foreign property with those funds. But foreign exchanges is I can sell a property in Mexico and buy property anywhere in the world. So I could sell a property in Mexico and buy a property in China. But I can't sell a property in Mexico and buy a property in the United States. So that's the way to look at it. Domestic for domestic or foreign for foreign is how that works. And that's it. So we have our corporate headquarters are in Carlsbad. We've got several offices in Solana Beach and Texas and kind of scattered around the country, but we're local right here. I put in a complete guide to 1031 exchanges. So after the fact, I can send this to Ed. That is actually a guidebook that we wrote, and it's great to hand out to your clients. It really explains the 1031 process and who we are, all of that. So the best thing to do if somebody asks you about a 1031 exchange is probably forward that to them. It's going to give them enough information. And then at that point, you can set up a call with me or one of our sales team and take it from there. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, my friend. So you guys, questions that were in the chat. Let's see here. After the sale is closed, doing a 1031 exchange, can the investor live in the exchange property or does it have to be rented out?
It doesn't have to be rented out. They just can't live there. So, we get a lot of questions about, oh, well, I never rented this property out, so it doesn't qualify. Well, vacant land qualifies. So as long as you're not using it as your primary residence and it is investment, which we know that if you buy a piece of real estate, the value is going to go up ultimately. So it's all investment. What they're really looking for is that it's not your primary residence. You're not using it for personal use.
Good question. All right, for older clients, could they use a traditional IRAs to roll into a 1031 exchange before the IRS makes them take out the traditional IRA and pay income tax on that money?
No, you can't you can use IRA money to invest in real estate by rolling it through a self-directed IRA. So there are ways to use retirement funds to acquire real estate, but you can't 1031 exchange those funds into real estate. So you would still have to be responsible for those taxes.
And then the last question that came up, can foreigners apply for 1031 exchanges if they have investment properties in California?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're a taxpayer in the United States, which if you have assets here and you do sell those assets, you are responsible for taxes within the United States. So you definitely qualify still for 1031 exchanges.
Awesome. And then one thing I noticed that wasn't on there, can we just touch on partial 1031 exchanges, which I learned about recently? Like I have an agent friend of mine who has a primary residence with an ADU in the back.
Mhm.
The primary has 2,000 square feet. The ADU, which has been rented out forever, has 1,000 square feet.
Uh-huh.
So would she be able to somehow implement 1031 exchange that portion of her overall like property?
Yeah, I mean you can do that. It becomes if it's one parcel or two, But the main thing is you can exchange portions, fractional interest, through 1031 exchanges. Um, sometimes people will have the guest house they use as an office. It becomes a little complicated with the CPA, but if you can prove that a portion of your property is being used for a business and the other half is being used for personal use, we do see that all the time. And so it kind of comes down to, rationing off, what portions are what, and being able to explain that in case there were to be an audit. But that's where we can jump in and help you and make sure that we show you, the audit risk of doing that. But it's done all the time. And so it's definitely possible.
Cool. And then another great question came up. What if you what if you own like a fourplex and you live in one of the units and rent the other three out?
Yeah,
Um,
that's
does
a
it kind of falls into that same partial?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we have a lot of people do that. And the beauty of that is that one unit that they have can qualify for that 121 exclusion. So they can move into a portion of that, get their $500,000 if they're married, filing jointly, free, tax free, or if they're single, the 250 tax free. And then the other three units can roll through a 1031 exchange where they can roll that into investment properties. And so it's a great strategy. A lot of people use it. A lot of people will, when we see these properties that have a lot of gain in them, we'll see people that will move out of their rental house and rent it for 2 years so that they can qualify for the 1031 exchange. And if they live in it 2 of the previous 5 years, they can qualify for the 121, which is that 500 of tax-free money. So we can actually see people that use this strategy of moving in and out of their rental properties so they can get the tax-free money and qualify for the 1031 exchanges.
Oh, that's interesting.
You can definitely use those together. I'll be happy to send you, Ed. I wrote up an article on how to use those two strategies together, and be happy to share that with you guys.
I'd love to be able to share that. Absolutely. So Kelly just came up with a question. Is there any point in the future that owners can sell it tax-free, like for seniors?
We haven't seen any litigation discussing that yet. The 1031 exchange has been around for quite a while. But outside of the 1031 and some op zone, the new opportunity zone things, I guess are not that new anymore. But those are the two strategies really that are used to avoid the taxes in real estate. But we haven't seen anything as far as what can happen with seniors yet.
I mean, except for Prop 19, where they can actually transfer their taxable base. That's helpful. I think it's over 55, if I'm not mistaken. They can transfer that tax base, and I think it's up to 3 times, if I'm right. That they could do it here. In California, and you can move from parts of California to other parts of California. But yes, the exchange till you drop.
Swap until you drop.
Swap until you drop. That's right. I love it. Awesome, you guys. Great questions. Anything else for Tommy while we have him here? Tommy, do you want to touch on any of the other investment opportunities that you're working on, kind of here in San Diego or and abroad?
Yeah, quickly, we have 57 projects that we're building now in San Diego County. We're doing a lot of the ADU, high density type stuff. So, for the agents out there, we're always looking for large lots that we can, expand the footprint. We're building about 2,100 ADUs now in San Diego County. So, doing the best we can to, fix the housing shortage and affordability issue that we have here. So, always looking for guys that want to invest in this stuff. Our minimum investment in our projects is 50,000. We're right now our investors are averaging about a 30% per year return on their investment. But for the agents, we're looking for more properties to acquire and build on, or help us sell the properties that we've finished. So the name of that company is SDRE. So you can see a lot of what we're doing over on SDRE.com. and work like that. So we do a lot of the TICs and DSTs too. We're building some large apartment complexes in Utah and Idaho. So, doing a lot of different things for our investors, but we love helping people not pay taxes on their real estate investments, but we're also a good resource for investors that are looking for things to invest in on the real estate side.
And then as far as lots, how big of a lot are we talking?
I mean, we've,
What's the minimum you're looking for?
Generally a minimum's around a 5,000 square foot lot. But we've got 7,000 square foot lots that, we're able to add 10 to 15 units on. So,
Wow.
we'll look at, at any of that.
Very cool. One last question popped up here. For military clients, are you saying they can do this 1031 exchange and sell their rental properties here in California and purchase replacement properties in Texas? So Yvette, don't forget that this is only for investment properties. And if we're talking military clients and they have a VA loan, they're probably living in that house, or
Right.
they should be.
Right.
And now I was referring, I have a military, I'm sorry, I have a military client and he has 2 rental properties in addition to his primary. So he has 3
Oh.
properties here in California. 1 he lives in and 2 he rents out. And he's been renting out for, oh gosh, 1 for 20 years and another one for maybe at least 15 years.
Yeah, no, we do a lot of military exchanges for that purpose. They do, they'll get stationed somewhere, buy a property, have to, deploy, go somewhere else, they'll rent that out. So we see quite a few military guys and girls doing 1031 exchanges. So yes, they can exchange anywhere in the United States, even Guam. So it's funny enough that Puerto Rico and Guam actually qualify for 1031 exchanges too, if we go outside of the US. But yeah, so anywhere in the United States does qualify.
Thank you. Yeah, they want to retire back home, which is Texas. And so they want to sell their properties here and then move back to Texas. And I know 2 of them is rental properties. 1 he's actually living in, but 2 of them is rental properties. And they were purchased throughout his career with different deployments, like you said.
Cool. Yvette, I'll link you up with Tommy so that
Thank
you
you.
guys can get the conversation going for sure.
Thanks so much.
And then can you sell 2 homes in one state and buy in another state?
Yeah. Yeah. So as many as you put together, we have portfolios of exchanges. So if someone's selling, entire portfolio of properties and buying 1s or 2s. So we, it's like putting together a puzzle. We're always matching them up to make sure we get the equal or greater value. Some of those can be complicated, but we're happy to do that. We can run through all that with you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you for showing up. I hope you guys got a little bit smarter today. Listening to my main man, Tommy. Thank you so much, Tommy, for your time and your expertise and helping us all out. And yeah, looking forward to getting my exchange going here in the near future too.
Yeah, that was great. I picked up a lot today as well. So thank you so much for your time, Tommy.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys. Have a wonderful week.
Have a great week. Give us a shout.
See you guys.